My name is Paul Ramshaw. I'm one of the founders of Sensation.io. We're a Munich-based startup looking to really disrupt customer feedback mechanisms. Today I'm going to be talking about sharing really some of our stories about doing this as a multinational company from Germany. I think Derry is the place that I've spent the most time in, apart from the places I've actually lived over the last few years, and it has a special place in my heart, and I'm super happy to be here. That's where I live now. And that's kind of probably the first thing that people think about before they visit Munich. If you do some research, and then definitely after you've been to Munich and go home, then this is a picture which is pretty representative of the city. It's a city which has alcohol and beer as part of its legacy, its story, really. And that's where I'm going to start, actually. So, once upon a time, 300 years ago, there was a prince and there was a princess, and they decided to get married. And they said to the whole town, which was Munich at the time, "Do you think we should have a party?" And everybody agreed, and they loved the prince and the princess, and so they made a huge party, and they had horse racing and a lot of drinking and partying and singing and dancing and shouting. The next year, when this couple, who were then... Did they become like king and queen then at that point? I don't know. Anyway, so they decided to have a party the next year, and everybody loved it again. And this is the story of Oktoberfest, right? But pretty soon they ran into this problem, which was they couldn't actually make enough beer because they would run out of beer in October, November. They just couldn't make enough. So they had to figure out a technology, an approach to make the beer quicker. And so they did that, but one of the side effects was that beer was actually stronger, but that's either a positive or a negative thing, depending how you look at it. And that's why if you go to Oktoberfest, the beer is kind of strong. But when they did that, then they needed a way of figuring out how to keep the beer safe over the summer and stop it spoiling. So they started to build cellars, kellers, underneath all the beer gardens. But then still, because Munich has quite good summers, still the beer would spoil, and so they figured out they would plant trees in the beer gardens. And they tried a few different kinds of trees, and eventually they settled on chestnut trees because they had the best coverage, and they put gravel on the floor. And this is how they keep the beer still to this day. And so if you go to a beer garden in Munich, then it's got gravel and it's got chestnut trees, and that's because of the story 300 years ago. But it's really a story of this. So this is the Audi catchphrase, which really says a lot, I think, about German culture and the way that they approach things, which is, my German's not super good, we're going to get to that later, but it's Vorsprung durch Technik, which means progress through technology. So I live in Munich, which is kind of why I'm here, so I'm going to talk to you about all these things. I have like 35 slides, by the way, but I'm just going to run through them super quickly. So I worked for Hybris for a long time. So do you guys know who Hybris are? So they're an e-commerce platform. They have customers like H&M and BP and so on, hugely successful, and they sold to SAP last year for $1.5 billion. And what I did at Hybris, though, was not do any of the important work. I ran an innovation practice where what we would basically do is just take kind of two technologies which don't look like they fit together, like NFC and Google Glass, for instance, and just mash these things together. And if it felt like the prototype had some kind of meaning, then, because what we really wanted to do is tell stories, right, then we would make a video. And I did that for 3 years and had a lot of fun. I think the best day that we had was the day that, so I always really wanted, Hybris have a blue logo, right? And I always kind of thought, blue sky, what do you think about when you think about blue sky? You think about beer, so how can we wrap Hybris's beer, Hybris's technology into a story about beer? And so we created this NFC beer ordering application and went to Augsburg one day and filmed a video about us drinking beer. It was kind of cool. So I did that for a long time, and a year ago, me and a colleague founded our startup Sensation.io in Munich. I'm English, obviously. He's Swedish. We have a pretty multinational team. We managed to get funding from angels in Munich. We have advisors based in Munich. The only part of our kind of whole snapshot, which isn't, is the technology, which is yeah, not German, really, I guess, in any way. And what we do is we have this way of allowing you as consumers to express how you feel, one part of the platform, and then brands, they can then tap into that. We're kind of reinventing kind of feedback mechanisms. One of the speakers earlier, I can't remember which one, was talking about how difficult it is when you're a startup to recruit good people, and that's no different in Germany as it is anywhere else. But I think for sure one of the things you need is, as a founder, as a CEO of a company, then you have to be extremely persuasive. And how you're going to do that with prospective employees is by being able to clearly express yourself and you know, talk about what your vision is, right? Because if you're up, you know, if you have super talented guys who could work for Google or Facebook, then you need an edge. But really our vision was we wanted to build a great technology company here in the middle of Europe. I can't see this. Yeah, so German people are kind of funny, you know. When they're at work, they're kind of super, super serious. Anytime where they're in a situation where there are any kind of rules, then they're going to follow those rules, right? So you can be at a junction, and the road is going to be from here to that screen, and you can see a kilometer in either direction, and there's no traffic coming, but there's a red man there. You cannot cross the road, and they will not cross the road. It's actually a fine. You're going to get fined 40 euros if somebody actually catches you crossing the road, but they won't cross the road. If they see you crossing the road, they're going to shout at you, "Think about the children." But any situation where, you know, there aren't clearly defined rules, like things like Oktoberfest, then they go crazy. I don't know. I think I've tried 5 different ways to learn German. My company paid 500 euros, and 6 of us, all expats at the time, put all that money into a pot, and we got a language teacher from the Blitz language school. I tried using Rosetta Stone. I tried using this amazing app called Duolingo. I can't speak German. It's actually really, really hard. And I think part of the problem with that is that Munich is such a cosmopolitan city anyway, right? So 25% of the people who live in Munich, they're not actually German. 50% of them aren't from Bavaria anyway. So what you have is you have this situation where I think in business the first language is almost English, really. If you go and see a doctor, unfortunately, then their English isn't so good. But in business, yeah, if my German friends were here, they would hate me for saying this, but you almost don't need to kind of worry about the language so much. If you actually have a distribution channel, then obviously you need to localize all the content and so on. We haven't produced a single document written in German in our company. So just some things about Munich which are kind of interesting. So it's 550 meters above sea level, which means that if all the climate change guys are right, super safe. It's surrounded by the Alps. People are crazy about skiing, hiking. We have a river called the Isar where people will go and barbecue. They have a football team. I don't like this one, so we're going to sponsor the other Munich team, which is 1860. Has a world-class airport connecting, I think it's the 7th busiest airport in the world. But the coolest thing, I think, is so many European destinations are available through the train network. So I traveled to Paris in November. It cost me 49 euros, and I was there in 5.5 hours or something. So that's kind of cool. And you feel better about yourself because you con yourself that you're saving the world a little bit. And so you know there's always this thing if you meet somebody from Australia and you know somebody else from Australia, say, and you always do this thing, "Oh, do you know that guy Dave from Melbourne?" And people go, "Oh, no." It's the same with BMW in Munich, right? So you're going to make one friend who works for BMW, and then you're going to be out one night and you're going to meet somebody else, and you're going to say to them, "Oh, what do you do?" And they're going to say, "I work for BMW," and you're going to say, "Oh, do you know Dave?" But they employ 20, 30,000 people. They're crazy about their cars, and that's actually something that, as startup, as entrepreneurs, we have to leverage everything that we have, right? So when we talk to American prospects, customers, then we always talk about precision engineering. We're from Germany. Look at the cars. And they love that. What's this bit? Yeah, there's some great things, some bad things, and some ugly things about doing business in Germany. Which do you want first? Ugly. We decided to make a startup. It cost us, I think, 37,000 euros to open a bank account. So to have the equivalent of a limited company, a thing called a GmbH, you need to have 25k in the bank account, and we spent 11,000 euros getting a contract done. And once you've done all that, then you have your contract. In order for that contract to be legal, you have to take it to a guy called a notary who's going to put the official stamp on this thing. In Germany, these guys are the equivalent of high court judges. And all this guy's going to do is he's just going to read out your contract. It takes him 15, 20 minutes, and it costs you 1,000 euros. And it's in German. We could have paid to have it translated, and then he would read it out in both languages, but I gave my co-partner power of attorney, which he thinks is good for a lot of things, but it's not. It's just that. The good things are, though, about that whole process is business runs very smoothly because everybody who has a GmbH has been through this pain. So there's a lot of trust and a lot of ease to doing businesses. If you want to kind of rent cars or offices or things like that. What are the bad things? There aren't really any bad things, really. It's just the horrific part, which is anything to do with German bureaucracy, but everything else is kind of pretty good, really. But you need to do all the kind of regular startup things to make this work in Germany, just, common sense business things like, figuring out exactly who your target customers are and, concentrating on their markets, which is what we did. And then in terms of the entrepreneurship, and it sounds so weird, because these Germans who kind of love process and they kind of actually really like rules, but at the same time, they're incredibly entrepreneurial, right? So I know a guy who has a startup and they're doing this, like the version of Uber, but for bikes. So if you're a small retailer, then you can have, delivery within 2 hours using this bike network, for instance. IoT is incredibly popular right now, so there's like loads of Fab Labs. Commerce has always been a big kind of, it's always had a big presence in Munich, I guess because of my kind of old company, but there are lots of other companies as well, and you don't actually have to believe me. So this is from angel.co. So there's 293 startups right now and so many investors, and these are all Munich-based. So that's kind of flourishing a lot. Then in terms of building networks, so I often think, actually, so my girlfriend, I would talk about the business and what we're doing with her, and she would say, yeah, but you're so lucky because to get the funding, you just talked to that guy and you knew that guy, But I think you have to use everything that you have at your disposal, right? Alex Ferguson, I don't like Manchester United, but he said this thing which I always remember, which is you make your own luck. So make your own luck. Utilize everything that you have. Can you do this remotely? I don't know if you can. I don't think the cost is like going to San Francisco, though. I don't know what the flights are to Munich. I guess it's like 100 euros, and then it's you're going to spend 50 euros a day. But you should definitely come to Munich or whichever city that you're going to go to and spend time, and don't be afraid about the language or any of those other barriers. And also, there aren't any bad neighborhoods in Munich. And I think there are 3 homeless guys who hang out by the central train station, and they're not mentally ill either. They're just a bit homeless. But so come out, have meetings, and then go home, and then maintain those relationships, right? You know, because even in companies, we're so geographically disparate that, you know, we're used to working remotely. So once you have that kind of human face-to-face contact, then maybe you can do it remotely. Yeah. This is just more stuff about how traditional these guys are. So my co-founder has an automotive background, so he came to Germany after studying in Sweden to work for car companies. And he got a job at, I can't remember what they call, but so car companies apparently, they actually subcontract a lot of this work to smaller companies, and he worked for one of those, but he was working on Audi cars. And his boss had 3 PhDs. And that meant when addressing this guy, using email, or if you meet him, you had to, it's not Dave or Herr Dave, it was Dr. Dave. But you couldn't do Dr. Dave because the guy has 3 PhDs. So it had to be Doctor. It sounds crazy, but part of me thinks, you know, the people that I meet in the startup community are very much like we would be in the less formal part of Europe, say. But then sometimes we have meetings, you know, if we're meeting potential investors or customers, and I will very much watch, you know, what the other guys are doing who are kind of more plugged into the German culture and see how they behave. And there is still a lot of Frau, Herr, action, so. I don't know how kind of delimiting any of that stuff is if you get that wrong, but so far I haven't made any fuck-ups so far. Okay. Yeah, so to conclude really, I think there are some fantastic opportunities for, you know, for technology partnerships and for sales channels, and the only thing you need to do is start leveraging your network and come out, pick an event which is kind of going to work for you, and send me an email and I'll meet you. And, you know, people are incredibly open and friendly and helpful in the kind of startup community, general and business community in Munich. So come out, check it out.